Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to our online event in which we plan to present to you the funding opportunities in the draft work program of EFSA for the years 2025 and 2026. My name is Gorgias Garofarlakis. I will be the facilitator of this event. I will be with you for the next 2.5 hours approximately, in which, as I said, we will cover the funding opportunities that we plan to launch in the next 2 years. Before we start, I think it would be useful to go through the housekeeping rules for this event. So you are automatically connected to this audiovisual stream. It's a one-way stream, so that means that unfortunately we cannot give the floor to you. However, you will have the opportunity to post questions in a dedicated Q&A chat that will be available towards the end of the event. The entire event will be in English. That means that if you have any questions, please submit them in English in order for us to be able to handle them, to reply to them. This event is being recorded, and we plan to publish this recording after the end of the event, a few days after the end of the event. Last but not least, and this is something that I will repeat towards the end of the event, after the event we will send you a survey, and please take a few minutes to respond to that because that will help us improve our performance in future events. Let me also go through the agenda for these 2.5 hours. The objective of the event is rather simple. We plan to answer the question, how is it possible to cooperate, in what sense, with scientific organizations across the European Union member states, Norway and Iceland, with EFSA, and in particular, what concrete cooperation opportunities we expect to see in the next 2 years. I would like to take the opportunity and note that whatever we present here in terms of expected goals, it's tentative. It's based on the draft work program of EFSA, which means that it is subject to change. So the general advice is that if you are interested in something, please check with the final published goal as it will be at the time that it will be published. The event will take place in 2 parts. In part 1, we will cover the strategy behind scientific cooperation projects, the grant and procurement mechanism that is supporting the implementation of those projects, and also the focal point network, which is the core mechanism that EFSA has in order to support cooperation with interested parties across the member states. In the second part, we will go into more detail into the scientific funding opportunities that we expect to have in 2025 and 2026. It's needless to say, I think that throughout this event, I will be joined with many colleagues of mine here in EFSA. In the first part, I will be with Donna Lucas, who is an officer in the finance unit of EFSA and team leader for strategic outsourcing, and also Elena Tsekure, seconded national expert and officer in the external relations and engagement unit of EFSA. I will give you a few insights really briefly regarding the strategy behind scientific cooperation for EFSA. It's also, I think, good to flag that EFSA is active in 2 areas, risk assessment and risk communication. EFSA is not active at all. It does not have it in its mission on risk management. So EFSA is not involved in preparing legislation or enforcing legislation. And between the 2 that I mentioned, risk assessment and risk communication, the vast majority of resources of EFSA is invested in risk assessment. The starting point for risk assessment is the scientific questions that we are receiving, the mandates, as we call them. And in the majority of cases, those mandates come from the European Commission, although it is possible to receive mandates from the European Parliament, the member state authorities, and it is possible for us to pose questions to ourselves when we think that this is necessary for us to perform better in the future. The scientific assessment per se is done by experts in the scientific panels of EFSA, and those experts can be assisted by further experts in working groups that are closely working alongside these scientific panels. It is also possible for third parties to contribute to that, and this is something that I will talk about in the next slides. The final output is a document that the scientific panel produces when they are confident that the scientific question that has been posed has been sufficiently addressed. And this adopted document becomes EFSA scientific opinion, which is published in EFSA's journal. Now, I mentioned scientific panels. EFSA has 11 such scientific panels that cover all the areas under the remit of EFSA, from plant health to pesticide residues to GMOs to contaminants, food enzymes, and so on. And on top of these 11 scientific panels, we have one more group of experts, the scientific committee, which is mostly looking into issues such as methodologies, guidance documents, and the harmonized application of those methodologies across the scientific panels. Now, this is a system that has served us really well all those years. This is a system that still works reasonably well. But if somebody would like to be provocative, one could ask the question, is this system going to be fit for purpose for the foreseeable future? Is it a system that can deal with the increasing complexities that we face? And when I say complexities, I mean complexities with regards to the questions that we receive, that they become increasingly more demanding, but also the science that we need to employ in order to provide scientific advice to the requester. Is it a system that can be responsive enough in the near future, knowing, for instance, that the volume of work, the number of questions that we are receiving is likely to increase significantly in the coming years? Can we afford duplication of work in risk assessment across Europe, or do we need to be very mindful of resources and try to join forces as much as possible? So I think that the key question, is it a system that can be sustainable for the coming years, or do we need to make changes? And to that end, EFSA was lucky enough to have I would say, important amendment of its funding regulation a few years ago. The transparency regulation, which amended the funding regulation of EFSA, made several changes, most of them oriented towards increased transparency, but one particularly important for scientific cooperation. In particular, the funding regulation now clarifies that member state competent bodies, the so-called Article 36 organizations, can have a substantial role in preparing the work for the scientific panels. Together with that change, EFSA benefited from an increased budget and additional staff, and these two factors also helped towards increased scientific cooperation with the member states, with the competent organizations there. These changes created, I think, fertile ground for us to develop the concept of partnerships. And partnerships is also scientific cooperation implemented through projects, but in this case, projects that are more ambitious, long-term, very closely associated to the risk assessment production machinery of EFSA, if I could say. In any case, the role of the scientific panel remains the same. The scientific panels are the bodies that need to make sure that the scientific opinion which is about to be produced fully addresses the question. So the role there has not changed, just the possibility for the member states to contribute more to the work of EFSA. Speaking about partnerships and scientific cooperation, an important element, of course, is the budget, the amount of money that we invest into that. And again, because of this change in our funding regulation, now we are in a very fortunate, I would say, position to have much more money available to that. If we look, for instance, back in 2019 or before, we still had scientific cooperation projects, but the amount of money that we would invest there would be in the order of magnitude of 7 million euros per year. Now, in 2024, the figure is more than 5 times higher. This year, we expect it to be close to 37 million euros. And for the next years, we expect it to stabilize around 35 billion euros. Together, however, with increased budget, we expect changes in the trends of the type of projects that we open. So with increased budget and with projects that try to meet this partnership ambition that we have, we expect to have fewer calls per year, but these calls will normally be larger in terms of duration, larger in terms of budget, and larger in terms of work that will be available for our partners there. At the same time, we would expect an increase in the participation, so an increase in the number of organizations that work with us. And this mostly stems from the fact that the new calls are broader in terms of scope. So the organizations participating are more likely to want to join forces and participate in consortium and not alone, as it used to be the trend a few years ago. A valid question that we often hear at this point is what is the mechanism? What are the steps that we follow in order to decide which task, which pieces of work we prefer to do internally and which ones we can do in cooperation with partners across the member states? And in a nutshell, in brief, I think that the steps that we follow are rather simple. The starting point is always the question and our understanding about what needs to be done in order for this question to be addressed. I'm talking about knowledge, I'm talking about science, but I'm also talking about finding the appropriate data, the appropriate evidence to support our scientific advice. And then we consult our member states through the various channels that we have. I'm talking about the advisory forum, which is a body comprised by member state representatives. I'm talking about the focal points assisting the advisory forum, and I'm talking about the various scientific networks of EFSA, in which, again, we find member state representatives. And through that discussion, we get a very good understanding about any activities in the member states that may be particularly relevant to the scientific advice that we want to produce, any knowledge or work results that we could perhaps immediately update, and a feeling about the capacities and the interest that may exist across the member states. And then we take into consideration whatever restrictions we might have. Budget is one, so we might not, or we might have the budget available. We might be having timelines imposed either by the question that we have received or by the law, the regulations that we need to follow, etc. And those three things give us a pretty clear idea about the resource mix that we need to mobilize in order to produce in a timely manner the response, the scientific advice which has been requested. The topics that we can address in scientific cooperation projects basically cover the entire remit of EFSA, from plant health and animal welfare to GMO, environmental risk assessment with regards to pesticides impacts, etc. You will also see calls from time to time on risk communication, but also other things not immediately associated with our remit, such as citizen science. And these are calls that help us explore what more we can do in terms of cooperation within and across the member states. Please note, however, that every year we can only address a handful of these topics. That is because, first of all, our budget is not infinite, and second, because our calls tend to occupy a large amount of time, so they span over several years. I would now like to take a step back and highlight the fact that cooperation is not restricted to projects. So I mentioned about partnerships and scientific cooperation projects, but in fact, EFSA has cooperation routes that go beyond that. We can work with individuals, with experts. I mentioned the scientific panels, which are populated by experts, but we actually have a large pool of experts that we can work with on very specific topics, the so-called individual scientific advisors. These are experts with whom we work when we have topics very close to their particular expertise. You can see a QR code on the slide on the left side. If you follow it, it will take you to the call that is now open for individual scientific advisors. So if you find it interesting, please by all means apply. We also have trainees in EFSA, approximately 120 trainees each year. I understand that it's unlikely that we have potentially interested parties for a traineeship among the audience, but if you are a professor, if you are a lecturer in a university, in an academic institution, please do advise your students to have a look at the traineeship call that we have each year. I think it's a very useful experience for them and for us, and also fun, I have to say. And before I leave this slide, I would like to highlight that we also have public consultations and calls for data. These are not associated with funding, but they are extremely useful for us. So please, from time to time, check what we have available there. And if you feel that you can contribute, your contribution would really be valuable for our work. And I would like to close. I would like to put a full stop here. I don't want to tire you more. I will leave you with this slide, which explains in a nutshell our vision, the blueprint of food safety and risk assessment and its role in food safety. So ideally, we would like to have a common EU culture for risk assessment in Europe, a culture under which each expert would be keen on contributing within the limits, of course, of his or her knowledge towards risk assessment challenges, food safety challenges. And in order to do that, we invest to the extent that we can in two things: in building pools of experts that can support our work in EFSA, in our scientific panels, in our working groups, or as individual scientific advisors, as I mentioned, and at the same time, invest in cooperation, in networking with competent authorities in the member states, in doing risk assessment together, in working as much as possible in a seamless way. I will leave it here. I will, of course, be glad to answer to your questions, but that will take place in the dedicated Q&A part towards the end of part one. And at this point, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Donna Lucas, that will dive a little bit deeper into the machinery of our grants and procurement mechanism.
Thank you, Gurgias. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am going to be talking to you in a little bit more detail about procurement and grant funding opportunities, but the mechanisms behind applying for those calls and where to find out more information about those opportunities. Now, also later in the presentation today, some of my colleagues will be giving you an outline of specific individual calls that will be coming not only for 2025, but also some for 2026 and 2027, with a view to giving organisations in member states a real overview in advance of what might be the future opportunities, not just next year, but also in the years to come. Now, you will see that the actual funding tool, procurement or grant, may not be defined in some of those cases. Additionally, the final budget may also not be defined at this stage, and that's something that we're working on at the moment. But all of these opportunities will be published in a very detailed list of procurement and grant opportunities that will be published on the EFSA website, possibly in early January after its approval by the EFSA Management Board in December. So if we take a look, first of all, at procurement, I'd like to help you understand a little bit today the difference between procurement and grants and the funding opportunities that we have. Now, EFSA outsources some aspects of its scientific work through the use of procurement, and we use this to establish contracts for services, goods and works with economic operators who are established in the EU. Now, the procurement procedures of EFSA must follow the rules of the EU financial regulation. And those rules set out a number of requirements in relation to the conditions that need to be met for applying to those calls and receiving those contracts. Now, only economic operators in the EU can apply, but we do have provision that the subcontracting of work is possible outside the EU as well. So we'll come on to that a little bit later in this presentation. Now, the type of calls for tenders that EFSA has are usually two. The first one being open calls for tenders. So that is where we want to buy a service with a value over 143,000 euros. Now, for those types of services, we are obliged to publish those calls in the EU official journal, and we are obliged to give at least 32 days for the submission of offers. Now, another type of procurement procedure that we will use is known as the negotiator procedure, and those are for procedures with a value between 15 and 143,000 euros, and they have slightly different advertising requirements. So they're not published in the official journal. The opportunity is published on the EFSA website, and interested organisations are asked to express an interest in being invited. And at a later stage, we will send out individual invitations to those who've expressed interest in being invited. Now, in both cases, it is a competition, and so the tenderers to open calls and negotiator procedures will compete in terms of quality and also in terms of price. We also have another opportunity with procurement procedures in duly justified circumstances to give a direct award of a contract. Now, those are in instances where we might have a monopoly situation. There's only one provider on the market that can provide those services. Now, any procurement procedure that we have will result in a direct contract or a framework contract. And what is the difference between the two? So a direct contract is a contract for a fixed piece of work over a fixed duration for a fixed price, whereas a framework contract will be over a longer duration, and we will place orders under the framework contract periodically for the duration of the framework. Now, the EFSA website's got a very nice infographic, which is also shown on this slide, and there's a link embedded in this slide to the infographic, and it explains very clearly the different types of procedure, the different types of contracts that result. If we move on then to grants, this is the other second funding scheme which EFSA uses to support its scientific tasks. Now, grant procedures, like procurement procedures, must also follow the rules of the EU financial regulation. And those rules set out the different types of grant procedure and also the different types of grant agreement that can result. Now, it must be noted as well that not all scientific tasks that EFSA might like to receive support on can be supported through grant funding. We have a very specific provision in Article 4 of our founding regulation, which requires only certain types of tasks, and there is a list of them, can be funded through grants. Also, we have a requirement that only certain organisations can receive grant funding from EFSA, and those organisations are the organisations who are on the Article 36 list, and we'll explain a little bit more about that later. Now, like with procurement, very similarly, there are many calls for grants that we run, which are open calls for proposal. So it's of any value, and any organisation on the Article 36 list is free to apply. We also have, very similarly to procurement, instances of monopoly, so where organisations may be the only one that can provide that service, or sometimes in grants it's not always a true monopoly. It could be that member states have designated certain organisations within their country as being the competent organisation for that type of data collection, for example. So there's a monopoly that's created there. So in some duly justified circumstances, we can also award grants directly to those organisations. Now, like with procurement, we have direct agreements, so usually for a fixed duration and a fixed price in grants, and we also have framework partnership agreements. So that would be an agreement of maximum 4 years, through which we would have shorter individual direct grant agreements under the framework over that period. Again, we have the infographic on grants on the EFSA website, and we've also developed over the last couple of years a very short but instructive 2-minute video, which really explains very well the difference between procurement and grants, highlighting not only the differences, but also highlighting a little bit the application process as well. The video's on YouTube, takes 2 minutes to watch, and we'd highly recommend that you have a look at that in conjunction with the procurement infographic and the grants infographic. If we move on to the next slide, here we can see a little bit the decision making that the team in finance, along with the operational units who need the scientific services, a little bit the decision making and thinking behind why we would choose a procurement or a grant as the mechanism to receive support. So some of the questions that we ask are on this slide, and I'll run through a few of them with you. So one of the first questions that we look at is whether there is a need to limit the task execution to organisations on the Article 36 list, in which case it would be a grant. So why would we do that? We might want to consider limiting subcontracting. Okay, in procurement, I mentioned before that subcontracting could also be to organisations outside of the EU. It could also be in grants. It's not actually possible to have subcontracting organisations outside the EU, and also we cannot in grants allow the subcontracting of core tasks. So that might be a consideration for us. If we don't want core tasks to be outsourced, then we could go through the grant mechanism. Another consideration that we might have is whether the tasks that we need the scientific support for are ones which are eligible for grant support. So as I was saying on the previous slide, we have specific provisions in our founding regulations that give a very detailed list of tasks that we can give grant funding for. So if some of the tasks that our scientific units need support with are not within that list, then we cannot fund those tasks through grants, we would be looking at procurement. A third consideration is whether we actually have the necessary expertise to perform the tasks in organisations that are on the Article 36 list. It might be a highly novel niche area that maybe only private sector organisations are involved in, and that might result that we don't necessarily have organisations on the Article 36 list that may be sufficiently experienced in those tasks. So that might be another consideration why we would look to procurement rather than grants. And finally, an important consideration is actually the ownership of the deliverables. So with procurement, when we have a procurement contract for services and goods and works, we own what we buy at the end, and EFSA may want to retain full ownership of the product of the services that are carried out. If that's the case and we want full ownership, then we would go down the procurement route. In grants, the ownership is with the beneficiary. EFSA may reserve the right through the grant agreement to certain types of use of the output, but the ownership would rest with the beneficiary. So that might also be a consideration for us when we're deciding whether to have a grant or a procurement. If we look then in a little bit more detail at who can apply, I mentioned a couple of times the Article 36 list. Now, if we look first of all at procurement, so in procurement we have procurement procedures which are open only to economic operators with access to the EU market. So here we're talking about the EU member states and some other countries that have bilateral trade agreements with the EU. Now, when we apply the rules on access to the market, it's the country in which the tenderer is established which needs to be considered. Now, tenderers, they may choose to apply alone for EFSA procurement procedures, or they can also apply in a joint offer with other partners, so applying in a consortium. But importantly, in that case, all members of the consortium must have access to the EU market. Then we have the possibility for tenderers to use subcontracting. And it is possible in procurement that tenderers who have access to the EU market, applying consortium, they're all based in the EU, they may decide to outsource some of the work to subcontractors who are outside of the EU, and that is acceptable. If we then look at grants and who can apply to grants, as we know, EFSA has specific provisions in its founding regulation. We have the Article 36 list, which has established a list of organisations that can apply to EFSA grant calls and receive funding. Now, also in that case, they can apply as a single organisation to the grant call, or they can apply in a consortium. Importantly, all members of the consortium must be on the Article 36 list. We can have subcontracting of tasks in grant agreements, but they cannot be core tasks. Finally, if we have a look at how to apply, so the application process is similar, but there are small changes between the two types of funding sources. So in procurement, the application procedure will depend on the value of the call. So for open calls over 143,000, tenders will apply using e-submission, and they'll apply using an online tool. Whereas for negotiated procedures at the moment, we will be emailing out the invitation to the candidates and they will send us their offers via email. Now, this year we will have a change and we're piloting also extending e-submission to those lower value negotiated procedures. Now, the timescales for applying to procurement procedures also varies, but this is set in law. So if we're doing an open call, so the higher value calls, you will have a minimum of 32 days to apply, and very often we will try to ensure that the timescales are as long as possible to allow you sufficient time to apply. With the negotiated procedures, the timescales can be less. The evaluation of the offers is carried out by EFSA staff, and they will draft an evaluation report, and tenderers will receive detailed feedback to their offers. Okay, so they will understand why they've been awarded or why they have not been awarded the contract, and that should help them feed into future applications. The actual evaluation criteria that are used relate to a number of steps in the evaluation. The first one being exclusion. So there we will look at things like whether the applicant has access to the market, whether they have a clean judicial record. That's amongst other items. Then we will look at the selection criteria. So that focuses on the skills and experience of the tenderer. And finally, we will look at the award criteria. So there we're looking at the quality of the technical offer of the tenderers and also the price. Now, the average time from the launch of a call to the signature of the contract is around 6 months, but this does depend on the type of procedure, the number of offers, so it can vary. Now, the application procedure for grants is similar. Last year, we successfully onboarded to e-submission, so applications can now be submitted electronically for our grant calls, and you can see all the details on the EU funding and tenders portal. The timescales to apply varies. Generally, we allow longer in grants, and there are no legal limits to a legal minimum. Similarly to procurement, the evaluation is carried out by EFSA staff. And again, those who apply to EFSA grants will receive detailed feedback on why they were awarded or why they were not awarded the grant funding. The evaluation criteria are similar. So we have similar exclusion criteria, similar selection criteria in terms of experience, and we also look at the quality. But in grants, we're not looking at price competition. Again, similar timescales to procurement for launch of the grant to signature of the grant agreement, around 6 months. Can be longer if we expect formation of consortium. It can be up to sort of 9 to 10 months in some instances. Here on the, this is a screenshot of the funding and tenders opportunities portal. So you will find all our opportunities on that portal, and you can get to this actually via the EFSA website, so a step before. But it's nice to be able to see all opportunities in one place now, both grants and procurement opportunities. Interestingly, if you're looking to apply for grants as well, there is specific provision in the grant structure of the pages that allow you to see how you can contact other organisations that you might be interested in forming consortium with. And with that, I'll be available for questions at the end of this session on procurement and grant mechanisms, but I hand over now to Elena, who's going to talk to you more about the focal point network. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Donna, and good morning, everyone. And my task here today is a little bit introduced to focal point network, and with this introduction also to explain what kind of support you can look to get from your national focal point. And my first slide is just a short reminder on what is focal point network. It's a long-standing network, EFSA network, that consists of representatives from 27 member states, so all EU member states, plus Iceland and Norway, and observers from Switzerland and pre-accession countries. Focal point network currently operates under the 5 areas of work, so they have specific like work agenda actually, and these areas are very wide and different, including risk communication, data and capacity building. But for this occasion and event, we are more interested in their work in knowledge and information management and support to scientific production, and also in engagement, collaboration, and partnerships. Focal Point Network is operational network, and it was founded to support EFSA's advisory forum network, that is more strategic EFSA network. And Focal Point support is done in different ways. One important point what they do is they advise on possibilities of cooperation and scientific projects stemming from EFSA to their national experts and organizations. And the main partner here is already several times mentioned Article 36 organizations. So Focal Points work very closely together with Article 36 organizations, and I will a little bit more explain this in a next slide. Focal Points, however, go also beyond national actors, and they also work as a connecting hubs among national experts, but also to experts and actors from other countries, and of course connecting them all to EFSA. Focal Points support information dissemination on all types of activities what are linked with food safety and risk assessment and other topics under EFSA remit. Focal Points also promote information on possible trainings and capacity building activities, and with doing this and to attract also new expertise, new organizations, they raise the visibility of EFSA work and inform on EFSA work and explain also the role of EFSA in EU food safety system. Next slide, please. And here, what kind of information and support EFSA Focal Point can provide you as an organization or individual expert about EFSA calls and funding opportunities, and also cooperation and partnership opportunities. As I said, Focal Points disseminate information, and of course, to disseminate this information, Focal Points receives it directly from EFSA. They are in general knowledgeable about what types of calls EFSA has, so information what Donna shared to us. They are knowledgeable where to retrieve information on EFSA calls, so they can point you where in EFSA web page or maybe national web page you can retrieve this information, and also depending case by case, they can support you in applications, or at least support you on finding where to retrieve information on how to apply to the calls. And support to national organizations is also done and via management of Article 36 organization list. Focal Points support this list throughout this process, starting as of nomination of new organization to be included in the list. Focal Points are very aware of all the requirements for organizations to be included in the list. They can share this requirements to you. They can share all necessary information for you to apply to be included in the list. Focal Points support maintenance of information by organizations in the list, and it's important that this information is renewed at least once in 3 years. Focal Points can support even reminders to national organizations that it has to be done, and they of course support any changes what needs to be done in a database in the system. And in worst case scenario, Focal Points also can support withdrawal from the list if needed. In the list, as I said, every organization has to follow specific rules and fit under certain requirements to be on the list. And as I said, focal points are very knowledgeable about this. Every organization are on the list is eligible to receive EFSA grants, and it doesn't depend if you are long-standing organization in the list or you recently got on the list, because there is also multiple cases when organizations are onboarding on the list because they have found grant where they have expertise and knowledge, and they would like to apply, or they were invited to be included in the consortium. So they are interested to get on the list. So yes, the main importance is to fit under the requirements and to be with updated profile in the list. What else focal points can do? Focal points also support partner search. So if you are interested in applying for calls, you can also ask support from focal point to connect and network with other member states. And also maybe if you have any questions, you can also ask focal point to support and clarify questions with EFSA. Case by case, focal points can also support application preparation, but it's very, very much a case by case situation. A very important part is that focal points also gather information on what went well or what went not so well during the application process. And they gather this information, and they also report this information to EFSA. So if you have experience in application process and you would like to share your experience, if you find something that didn't work well or something that worked well and you would like to share it with your other national organizations and EFSA, you are very welcome to contact your focal point and provide this feedback. Focal points also, based on your feedback, can implement several activities to address these bottlenecks or share best practices identified. And last but not least, focal points also gather ideas and information on what kind of proposals for new cooperations, networkings, and partnerships you have. And they can bring this to EFSA, and they can bring also this to other countries, and to look for possibility to cooperate on these ideas via diverse tools available, also including via focal point activities. So if you have nice idea on what you would like to cooperate or partnership with other countries, please contact also your focal point. And last but not least, focal points also, as I said before, raise the visibility on ongoing calls, and they do it with direct dissemination to Article 36 organizations. Also, they disseminate this information to relevant organizations that are beyond the list of Article 36 organizations. They can do targeted dissemination to relevant actors and individual experts if they see that, and they know by their networking experience that there are some individuals who are very interested in one or another item. The focal points maintain focal point web pages where multiple publications on EFSA activities are available, most likely translated at your national language. That helps to raise understanding on EFSA calls and activities. And of course, focal points are open to give to your organizations and in your events also presentations on opportunities stemming from EFSA calls, and also they can organize dedicated events on EFSA activities, on focal point activities, and on networking partnership opportunities. And the last slide, I address you all. If you always contact your focal point if you are interested in things, and I hope that most of you know your focal point. If you are not familiar with your focal point, you can find your focal point information in EFSA webpage. You see the interactive print screen of interactive map there. If you find your country, click on it and a pop-up window with information will appear. There is also a QR code for easy access to this information, and also a nice infographic with more information on what does focal point network do. Thank you a lot for your attention, and I give floor back to Gorgias.
Thank you very much, Elena, and thank you, Donna, for your presentations. I think we managed in a very short time to give I would say, a very brief overview, but substantial overview about what we can offer, what we can support, and how we can support it, especially from the channel of the focal point network, which is, I would say, a very approachable channel at member state level, particularly important if somebody is a newcomer to our, let's say, group of risk assessment organizations. The chat, the dedicated chat for the questions and answers is open, so please feel free to submit any questions that you might have. We'd be happy to reply. I don't see, we do not have any anymore. Okay, so please take advantage of the time that we have available. We have in front of us give or take 10 minutes, which we can dedicate to questions that you might have. Perhaps in the meantime, I can refer to questions that you had submitted. Let me check. Yes, questions that you had submitted at the time of application, at the time of registration. I see one. Yes, one was about the possibility for countries outside the EU to participate in the funding opportunities of EFSA. And I think that is something that you briefly touched upon in your presentation, Donna. Donna, would you like to take this? Thank you.
Yes. So as we mentioned in the presentation, but also on the EFSA website, it's clear on the infographics that for procurement procedures, tenderers who are not established in EU countries cannot apply for EFSA procurement contracts. Also for grants, applicants who are not established in EU countries or countries with bilateral agreements and who are not on the Article 36 list cannot participate to the funding opportunities. The only mechanism is through subcontracting. So organisations that are not based in EU countries, it may be possible to subcontract some tasks to them. I say this generally because there are bilateral trade agreements with some countries through which they do have market access in procurement. So if you have any doubt for any call that you see advertised, you should make a specific clarification request in relation to your country and whether it can participate in that call.
Thank you very much, Donna, for this. I see another question, which again, it's in your domain. It's a question from the Lithuanian focal point that asks if Article 36 organizations are allowed to participate in procurement calls as well. I believe that the answer is yes, but please, Donna, the floor is yours.
Yes, that's correct, Gorgias. So there is no limitation on organisations which are Article 36 organisations in also participating to procurement calls of EFSA to receive a procurement contract. Of course, the opposite is true for other organisations that are not on the Article 36 list. They cannot participate to EFSA grant calls. Would you like me to take also the next question, which I see posted already?
Yes, I think it's coming from the Norwegian colleagues of ours, and okay, there is a valid point. So please, Donna, go ahead.
Yes, indeed, it's very important to specify that the economic operators are not just based in EU, but also the EEA countries. So certainly Norway is certainly eligible both for the procurement and the grants on the Article 36 list. So there is a specific list and guidance on the EFSA website that sets out very clearly, not just mentioning EU countries, but all of those other countries like the EEA countries that have eligibility to participate to EFSA procurement procedures, and also eligibility to be accepted onto the Article 36 list.
Thank you, Donna. I will take the questions as they appear because I see another one, but let's first take a question from Romania. I will read it. Do we have to ask for details on grants or procurements first directly to Focal Point or also to EFSA? I think it's a mixed question. I'll take the first part about the Focal Point and then give the floor to you again, Donna, as well, because there is a channel for direct communication when the time comes. So the Focal Points could be perhaps the first stage, the first point of request, but they can generally provide general information. They will not go into the specifics of a call. There, I think the colleagues in procurement can help. Is that the case, Donna?
Yes, indeed, that's correct. So if you have specific questions on a grant or a procurement call that is advertised, you may, of course, ask your Focal Point, but there is a mechanism through which you can submit questions on the calls, and you will receive a dedicated answer in a short amount of time. Actually, we have a legal time limit in which to reply to clarifications on calls which are published. So yeah, you can receive specific answers also to grant calls and also procurement calls.
Thank you, Donna. I will go to the next one, which is a little bit different from the previous one. The question is, since the ownership of data and the results of procurements is EFSA, how is the policy of authorship in publications of scientific papers related to these procurements? Now, the question speaks about procurements. The ownership that you mentioned for EFSA is indeed the case for procurements, but I believe that we can deal with situations like that in some cases. I will give the floor to you, Donna.
Thank you, Gorgias. Yeah, indeed, the ownership in procurement rests with EFSA, and we then may use those deliverables from the procurement contract in order to contribute to the drafting of scientific papers, which may then be published. The policy in relation to then authorship, so acknowledging perhaps where the source of some of the information came from for the publications that we make, will vary case by case, depending on what information is used from the deliverables. So I can't give a blanket answer now, but it will be treated case by case, and there will be specific provisions in the procurement contract itself, which will deal with authorship for the deliverables in that particular contract.
Thank you, Donna. I think that the message, I suspect that the question came from people working in academia or research institutions. So I think that the message is it's something that we can look into on a case-by-case basis, as you said. I'm checking for additional questions. Yes, this must be a question. I recall seeing it in the questions that come from the registrations that we received. And again, I think that, Donna, you are the most suitable person to reply. Apologies for that. So the question reads, is it possible for a consultancy company, for consultants, to apply to any of the upcoming funding opportunities? The floor is yours, Donna. Thank you. Thank you,
Gorgias. The short answer is it will vary case by case. Okay, if you are based in the EU or an EEA country, you have market access to our procurement calls, so you are entitled to tender for the procurement calls that we advertise. Now, whether you will be successful will depend on whether you meet the very specific requirements for those services, which are generally selection criteria based on your experience. So the fact that you are a consultancy company does not preclude you from applying for these calls. What would preclude you is if you don't meet these selection criteria requirements, which are experience on certain topics. That said, if you look at some of the calls that we advertise and you feel that you don't immediately meet all the selection criteria requirements, it's always worth remembering that you have the possibility to apply in consortium with other organisations. So look around and find maybe other partners that you can work with to apply in consortium. Maybe you meet some of the requirements and the other partner meets the other part of the requirements. You can apply jointly together to meet the requirements that are advertised for that call. So yeah, in a consultancy could apply for some of the upcoming funding opportunities in procurement. In grants, there is always the requirement, the prerequisite that you must be on the Article 36 list in order to apply for EFSA grant funding.
Thank you, Donna. Very clear. I see we have one more question. The colleague asks, what is the procedure to add an institution to Article 36 to make it eligible for both procurements and grants? I believe I can start providing a reply and then maybe we can complement it from the finance side as well. So adding an organization to the Article 36 list is a process which is carried out by the member states. The actual procedure depends on the country, but usually it's an authority such as a ministry. Article 36 organizations are designated by the member states and they need to meet a number of criteria that are established in the regulation. Those criteria have to do with scientific and technical competencies, of course, but also other things like capacity with regards to confidentiality, independence, which is quite important for working with EFSA, and so on. So there is a procedure to be followed. The focal points, as Elena mentioned, can guide interested parties through the procedure and actually can even help them understand if they would be eligible to enter the list of Article 36 organizations. I would like to reiterate what Donna said. Possibility in participation in procurement procedures is open to whoever has access to the EU market, so you do not have to be in the Article 36 list for that. The Article 36 list is a requirement only for the call for proposals for the grant that EFSA opens. Let me check if we have additional questions. Yes, I see one that was just added to the chat. Everything concerning applications is referred to Article 36. If your consultancy is in the Article 36, can you participate on calls? Correct. And again, I will say yes, if you are a consultancy and you are in the Article 36, yes, but if you are a consultancy company only, it is unlikely that you will be on the Article 36 list. I can see cases where an organization would be in the Article 36 and have perhaps an activity that could be technical consultancy, if that is the case. I see it as possible. Am I interpreting your presentation correctly, Donna?
Yes, you are, Gorgias. Apologies for the pause. There's a transition between the speakers if you're waiting for us, but yes, you are interpreting the presentation correctly.
Thank you. Indeed, yes, this is a technical restriction of the platform. We need to give it time for the camera, for the video feed to change between us, the speakers, hence the delay, which can be a little bit annoying for you, the audience. My apologies for that as well. I see that we do not have any further questions. I would like to thank you all for your participation in this first pass and of course for your questions. Now we will break for 10 minutes and we will reconvene at 11, so in 10 minutes time. So looking forward to see you all. Please feel free to stay connected if you want to, and we will reconvene in 10 minutes. See you shortly. Apologies for this sound issue. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this second part of our event. If it is the case that you had not joined us for the first part, now we are about to enter the part where we describe the funding opportunities that we expect to have in 2025 and 2026. My name is Georgios Garofalakis. I work for the Knowledge, Innovation and Partnership Management Unit of EFSA, and I will be the facilitator of this event also for part 2. Together with me, there are many colleagues, many good colleagues from around EFSA. I will go through the list of the names and you will see them presenting their own calls later on. So we will have Anastasia Livaniou and Sofia Ioannidou for the Integrated Data Unit of EFSA, Christina Alonso-Adikoberry from the Engagement and External Relations Unit of EFSA, my colleague Raquel Garcia-Matas, also from the KNOW Unit, Konstantinos Paraskevopoulos from the Chief Scientist Office, Yves van der Stede from the Biological Hazards, Animal Health and Welfare Unit, Germán Ginés Antonja from the Pesticides Peer Review Unit, and last but not least, Giuseppe Stancanelli and Francesca Salinari from the Environment, Plants and Ecotoxicology Unit of EFSA. All of us together, we will give you a preview of what we expect to have. And as I said in the first part, and I will repeat it now, what you will see here is based on the draft work program of EFSA. So changes might take place, which means that please do consult with the call as published in order to be certain that you will have the definite information that you need. I will repeat the house rules in case you're joining now. You're automatically connected to this audio video stream. It is not possible for us to give you the floor, but it is possible to submit questions in a dedicated Q&A chat, which we will open towards the end of part 2. The event is being recorded, and a few days after the event, we will be publishing the recordings on EFSA's website. Last but not least, with regards to the housekeeping rules, we intend to launch a survey for the evaluation of the quality of this event, where we will be asking your views about what we can improve in further future events. So please do take a couple of minutes to respond to that. Before I start about the expected calls for 2025, I would like to take a moment to remind you that we have some calls already open. You see 6 calls on your screen. The ones in blue are calls for proposals, so they are supported by grants. These are calls addressed to Article 36 organizations, but we have also 2 procurement calls available. The first one about the role of nitrite and nitrate in the production of nitrosamines in foods. It's a call with a deadline which is really close. But apart from that, the rest, I think, allow for sufficient time for somebody to prepare an application, even if they start now. So we have a call open until the 22nd of January on the evaluation of risk assessment for the evaluation of dossiers of novel foods. We also have a call open until the 30th of January for the revision of a GATA's document on terrestrial ecotoxicology. Please note, however, that this call has a double eligibility criterion, so it requires applicants to be both Article 36 organization and competent bodies under the pesticides regulation. We have a call open on our fellowship program, EU-FORA, for which my colleague Christina will be talking in a couple of minutes. And then we have a call for tender open regarding EU menu, which I believe will also be covered by my colleague Anastasia in a minute or so. Last but not least, we have something open. We have a framework contract called open, which concerns risk communication. And since this is a rather different topic than the other calls that we have, perhaps it would be useful to say a couple of words on it. So this is a call that would lead to a framework contract. It has 3 lots. The 3 lots concern the collection of data regarding perception and awareness of the audience, of the greater public, in the areas of work that EFSA is engaged. It also covers the need for services for ad hoc perception measurements on specific topics that we might be interested in. And lastly, it includes services for testing communication products or communication services. This is a call that builds on work that we have already done with the help of contractors in the recent past. In particular, it comes after the implementation of a roadmap document, which identifies 4 areas particularly important for risk communication for EFSA. And those areas, you can see them on the slide, have to do with false information related to food safety, effectiveness of transparency initiatives, insights into consumer trade-offs between risks and benefits, and factors linking perception and behavior among consumers. So this call is open. It will be open until the 30th of January 2025. It is a 4 million call, a ceiling of 4 million. So please, if you are in the area of risk communication, do take the time and give it a look. And with that being said, I would like to pass the floor to Anastasia Livaniou for her presentation in the area of data collection. Anastasia, the floor is yours.
One that is already open and ongoing, as Gorgias presented earlier, and 2 that are coming up in 2025 and 2026. Starting from the ongoing one, the preparatory activities for EU Menu 2. The overall objective of this call is to identify an organization or a consortium of organizations who can support EFSA in different activities in preparation of the update of the EU Menu guidance. The first objective of the call is to propose possible simplifications for the Food X2 classification system and prepare a compendium for the better use of the Food X2 facets according to different food groups. Objective 2 is to propose a central food propensity questionnaire and the respective model for the data collection to be used for the next round of EU Menu surveys. Objective 3 is to shed some light on the self-administered dietary assessment methods by defining technical requirements for software and also proposing a protocol for such methods. The objective 4 covers the final report with proposals for the EU Menu guidance amendments based on the previous 3 objectives. With the closure of this project, we will update the EU Menu guidance by the end of 2026 and launch the new round of EU Menu surveys. The setting up of a consortium is encouraged as it may be necessary for an optimal and targeted expertise in each of the objectives. The estimated duration for this procurement is 12 months. There is a maximum budget of 300,000. And the deadline for receipt of tenders is the 28th of January 2025. At the top right of the slide here, you can also see a QR code that can direct you to the page where you can find more information and the tender specifications. Next slide, please. Regarding the future calls, there will be a call for proposals to be launched in July 2025. This call aims at signing framework partnership agreements with Article 36 organizations that EFSA can entrust tasks that are falling within the mission of the integrated data unit. Specifically, the main objective is to provide data management and analysis expertise to improve the methods that we use for the collection and management of scientific data that the member state authorities are sharing with EFSA. The expertise needed will be similar to the current framework partnership agreement we have that was launched in 2021 and is expiring soon. And this covers areas related to EFSA's data collections like chemical and biological monitoring, food consumption, food composition, as well as expertise on the respective data transfer and validation process. The budget for this framework partnership agreement is yet to be defined, and the call will be launched July 2025, so July next year. The second upcoming call is for the end of 2026, so we go a year later, so 2 years from now, to support the national dietary surveys in compliance with the EU menu methodology. So this procurement procedure basically refers to the second round of EU menu projects. So here we aim to contract organizations from EU member states which have a government mandate to carry out a dietary survey at national level in the period from 2027 onwards. Under the resulting contracts, the contractors should follow the EFSA guidance on EU menu methodology. That is due to be updated by the end of 2026, as we saw earlier. The dietary data collected should follow and be transmitted to EFSA following the predefined data model. The budget also here is yet to be defined, but it might be useful to note that we wish to support an average of 3 countries per year. And we also hope that we can launch this call by the end of 2026. And with this, I give the floor to my colleague, Christina. Thank you.
Selection of hosting sites and fellows for the European Food Risk Assessment Fellowship Program. These calls have been annually launched in EFSA since 2016, and with this format, the format that requires a mandatory consortium of 2 Article 36 organizations from 2 different member states, Iceland or Norway, has been being launched since 2021. The current call was launched last week and will remain open until 20th March 2025. With this call, as I said, we intend to select 15 hosting sites and fellows for this EU-FORA program starting in September 2025. The organizations, as I said, they need to apply in consortium of 2 organizations, one acting as hosting site, proposing a work program for the training of the fellow, and one acts as fellow sending organization, identifying among their staff a fellow to be trained. The fellowship will last for 12 months, and the fellow remains a staff member of their institution and is released from the regular tasks in order to follow the program. Most of the work program is followed remotely, and fellows are required to spend a minimum of 3 months at the hosting organization in order to enhance networking and the learning by doing. As I say, this is a call that is regularly launched every year in November, and so the intention is to launch it again in November 2025, also as a direct grant. The grant amount, the contribution from EFSA is 55K per fellow per consortium. And please keep the deadline in mind. So the deadline is 20th March 2025. In case you are interested in this call and you request or you need support to find a partner or to identify a partner for the mandatory consortium, you are kindly invited to contact your national focal point. Next slide, please. For this call, the one that is currently running since last week, we have introduced 2 novelties. It's a pilot to boost the EU-FORA potential both in partnerships and capacity building. For the EU-FORA potential in partnerships affecting the call itself, so the submission of proposals, we have included a list of mini projects under Appendix A in the call, which can become part of the Fellows Placement Project. They correspond to ongoing work in various preparedness topics in EFSA. And very important to keep in mind that the selecting of one of these mini projects that can be selected partially or in total, I mean each one of the projects, is optional. So opting to do so doesn't carry any special weight in the evaluation of the proposal. It's a way of boosting this partnership potential of the call, and with the aim of bringing the programs closer to EFSA and providing information on EFSA's ongoing work. On the side of capacity building, we have added a new deliverable at the end of the fellowship, which is a brief slideshow with a narration and notes that could be uploaded as a learning pill into a learning platform. And with this, I just want to remind you the deadline, 20th March, and please ask your national focal point for support in case you need help in identifying a partner. And now the floor is yours, Raquel.
To this initiative or to this approach in EFSA. This slide it differs from the previous ones as it is introducing an approach per se, or an initiative, or what I could say also a concept in EFSA for delivering and producing scientific training courses. It also derived from the last year announcement on a call for hiring a coordinator for scientific trainings, because the approach of the concept incorporates three components, which is a coordinator of scientific trainings, internal subject matter experts that EFSA staff apply, but also external subject matter experts for which I will drive your attention. This drove me to the announcement or the information to be provided to you on an individual scientific advisor scheme in EFSA, through which we are hiring these subject matter experts or tutors, externals, for providing support in implementing this new approach for scientific trainings. Please note that this scheme, or this ISA scheme, is launched by EFSA to obtain expert opinions and advice in specific cases, and that is not overlapping or substituting the EFSA panel and working groups expert system. Is a call for individual experts with expertise in the EFSA area, but I would like also to draw your attention to the different tasks that are described in that ISA scheme, but more specifically to the ones dedicated to training or training expertise. So within the tasks available, EFSA is asking for experts that can provide expert advice and support in developing training materials and training program, as well as to deliver training course as tutors in scientific topics under the remit of EFSA. This will result in the development of various training courses from identified training needs and knowledge gaps. The approach has been already piloted, is being piloted for different topics that I display here for you, just to give you a hint of what could be the topics to be addressed under this approach. Like, for example, BND modeling, TK plate modeling, and dietary exposure assessments. The trainings meant to be delivered by this approach would be open to Article 36 to member states, as well as for external experts in EFSA, like panel members and working group members. With this approach or this concept, we are planning to deliver more than 20 courses in 2025 and 2026. And the reason of my presentation today here was to encourage you to become an external subject matter expert or tutor, and also encouraging you to disseminate this ISA scheme in case you have knowledge of potential experts that may have these skills in teaching and in tutoring, in order that they could apply and create and enlarge the database and the list of potential external tutors in EFSA. The Call the ISA scheme is covering many other tasks, many other requests of EFSA for advice, but I am especially calling here for you to apply in case you have those specific skills on trainings. We are expecting in 2025 to contract through that scheme experts with this kind of skills with a value of 50K. The scheme is based on a fixed daily remuneration, so obviously depending on the efforts needed for each training, the amount will be differently. As also we plan to continue if the concept and the approach is successful, we plan to enlarge and continue implementing this approach in future years, for which not even ISA experts will be contracted, but also potentially a new call for hiring a new training coordinator will be launched in 2026. Thank you very much. With this, I pass the floor to my colleague, Constantino.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. Hope you can hear me well. So good morning to all. And now, from my side, would like to move on and highlight to you in the next 4 slides some upcoming, therefore future calls, which are in the context of preparedness, therefore aimed at addressing future risk assessment challenges in a number of different domains, but which, however, all have a common element in the sense that they're projects that have stemmed from some roadmaps for action that also Gorgias mentioned before, for its communication that EFSA has recently completed. Here in this slide, what you can see is information on the roadmap for action to advance in the area of exposure assessment, and in particular in the area of aggregated exposure. This roadmap was completed this summer, and for its implementation, there would be 2 to 3 calls, which may be grants or procurement, with a total, therefore for all the calls, a total estimated budget of 3 million, which is yet to be defined precisely. The common objective of those calls will be to promote EFSA's vision for advancing in aggregate exposure assessments for chemicals using both exposure models as well as human biomonitoring data. The scope of those calls will be, sorry, yes, not yet. Okay, thank you. The scope of those calls will be to, as I said, is yet to be defined, but they will be designed to address key knowledge gaps, such as the ones that you see here on this slide. For example, to develop harmonized methodologies, create modeling data platform, as well as approaches to integrate human biomonitoring data. We will be scoping these calls over the course of next year, and the first ones will likely be launched towards the end of 2025, with commitment expected over in 2026. The rest of the calls will be for the year after, meaning they could be launched in 2026 with expected commitment in 2027. Next slide, please. Okay. Similar to the one on aggregated exposure, there will be 2 to 3 calls for the implementation of the roadmap for the risk assessment resulting from the combined exposure to multiple chemicals. This roadmap was published a little while ago, in fact, with the aim to support EFSA's strategic objective to implement routine mixture risk assessment in the future across several food safety domains. Again, as with the previous roadmap, the scope of these calls is yet to be defined, but they will be designed to address those areas with key knowledge gaps identified in the roadmap, such as what you can see here, including both specific areas like pesticides or food contact material exposure assessment, but also aiming to develop more horizontal tools and methodologies. The total estimated budget for those calls, which is yet to be defined, whether it will be procurements or grants, is 2 million. And the timeline is the same as in the projects for the aggregated exposure. Next slide, please. Okay. So the third roadmap from which a number of calls will be launched is the one on Omics methodologies and associated bioinformatic approaches. Here, the main objective that these projects will aim to address is to support EFSA's objective for the wider application of Omics approaches in several areas of the risk assessment. Also, for this group of calls, I should say there will be 2 to 3 calls again that are also needing to be scoped, but they will be designed to cover the areas for which further advancement in knowledge was identified in terms of data and methodologies. And those include, for instance, advancing the application of genomics, also incorporating other omics techniques in areas such as GMOs or novel foods, as well as developing methodologies to make use of publicly available data for omics. The total budget for those calls estimated is again 3 million, and the timeline is the same as with the calls from the other roadmaps. Next slide, please. The final slide from my side is to highlight to you another domain from which a call or calls will be launched, and that is a domain focusing again on preparedness, and the aim is to launch explorative projects in the area of food and feed innovation, and that would include both novel and innovative products as well as corresponding innovative technologies. This project will be more like a roadmap or a blueprint or something like that, aiming at identifying key knowledge gaps and needs and priorities that would enable EFSA to risk assess such future products. At this moment, we foresee 1 to 2 calls. Again, we're not sure yet whether it will be procurements or grants, with a total estimated budget of €500,000. In terms of timeline, we plan to launch these calls by Q2 of next year. And that would be all from my side. Thank you very much. And I would now like to pass the floor to Yves. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I hope you hear me, and I'm also honored and happy to present you on another field, another domain on animal welfare, a call that we have in mind and originates from what we call the SPIDO roadmap on animal welfare. It's actually a follow-up of that roadmap in which EFSA identified, I would say, major gaps in order to be able to do more quantitative risk assessments in relation to the animal welfare. This grant call I would like to present is actually focusing on broiler chickens, where we would like to actually pilot a standard data collection of animal-based measures in broiler chicken. So we are actually, we would like to identify preferentially a consortium of Article 36 organization with experience in welfare of poultry. And the main idea of this call is quite, I would say, basic, but fundamental in my view, is that we would like to identify and collect in the field on a large scale animal-based measures and related management and resource-based data from broiler industry on different farms in different member states and in different settings. And we would like to combine it within that call. That's an idea we have to combine, I would say, field data collection with eventually experimental design as well, in which we would like to really investigate the effect, for example, of important factors identified for us, I would say, influencing the welfare of the broiler chicken, like stocking density, the use of covered verandas, enrichments, dark brooders, and the use of slow-growing breeds. So the outcome of that grant is very, I think, practical, fundamental, as I said, is to develop really protocols in order to be really saying this is the way we should harmonize and standardize data collection in broilers in Europe to collect animal-based measures and to find relationships between the output of the animals and the input, namely the management-based and the resource and environmental-based data. For this call, we plan to launch that by next year, somewhere in May. We would like to keep that at least 6 months open. The total budget foreseen is 1.5 million euros for a period of 4 years. And as I said, it will be a grant call. And that's it for me. I'm happy to give the floor to my colleague Germán.
Thank you and good morning, everybody. So yes, now I would like to explain you an upcoming call on the area of pesticides. We are drafting the call and it will be launched very soon, probably, yes, most likely in the first quarter of next year. And it's to contribute to the risk assessment of active substances in plant protection products. Indeed, our intention is to launch this call to establish framework partnership agreements with Article 36 organizations. And the reason is because there is an ongoing, FPAs that will expire November of next year. So we want to have new FPAs in place so we can continue the excellent collaboration with the Article 36 organizations. The new call, yes, will be launched soon, and the expected duration of the framework partnership agreement established will be again 4 years. It will be in the area of risk assessment of active substance and also pesticide residues. Differently to the existing FPAs, for this call, we want also to encourage consortiums of eligible organizations, and the list of tasks that can be covered under this call is very wide in the area of pesticides. It can be, for example, evaluation of active substances, chemical active substances, microorganisms, novel active substances, pesticide residues, and then also other tasks like data collection, literature review, support to EFSA guidances in the area of pesticides, cumulative risk assessment, contributions to Euclid development, or report on and labeling, classification and labeling. The expected ceiling for this call is around 2 million. This to be confirmed, and yes, and we expect to encourage you to Article 36 organizations to apply because it will be we expect several specific agreements to be launched. So thank you. Yeah, now I give the floor to my colleague Giuseppe.
Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure now to present a call which we will launch in the first quarter of 2025. Is about plant health, so a topic a bit different. And the reason we launched this call is that when we work on a risk assessment of exotic plant pests not present in the EU that may cause damage to the EU agriculture and forestry, we deal with searching for a large data type on the pest, and very often these data are missing because these are exotic pests not present in Europe, little study maybe in other continents, but which are possibly associated with the commodity we are importing. So that's why, if we go to the next slide, we normally use a quantitative approach where in our panel we assess the risk of this plant pest, and we show with the uncertainty curve how much we know about this pest. When the curve is very broad, means we know very little. The uncertainty is very large. And so we explain to the risk manager how they should consider this risk. Sometimes, if this uncertainty is very large and the pest is very dangerous, it is better to fund a dedicated target research to solve the knowledge gaps than to only quantify the uncertainty. And this is what we've done in several cases. Please, next slide. So, for example, on Xylella fastidiosa, this pathogen causing devastating disease in olive in South Italy, disease in almond in Spain. We launch, we have several grants ongoing. Currently, we have a grant to study a new American potential vector, an insect sharpshooter, Draculocephala robinsoni, which is recently introduced between Spain and France. You can see the photo. We are studying with a consortium led by EPB in Portugal, the potential vector Xylella in the Portuguese epidemics. And we're also with University of California, Berkeley, studying the risk of Xylella for the EU temperate area crops, collecting data in North America. In the next slides, you can also see that we work on also not only Xylella, but on new and emerging plant pests, for which there is a key uncertainty in the risk assessment. For example, we have a grant led by University of Torino in Italy to collect data on the taxonomy of different Colletotrichum fungal isolates collected in Europe and worldwide, because there were recent taxonomical changes. A group from Italy is studying in Canada the European host range of the American elm borer, Sapeda tridentata, that is affecting the American elm, but we don't know how much when introduced, for example, with the trade of logs of wood, how much it could cause damage to the European elms. And then we have a grant on the epidemiology of control of the fungal disease, citrus spot in Tunisia. Tunisia is the only area in the Mediterranean where for the first time this disease is established, causing damage. So by having a grant on the epidemiology and control of this disease in Tunisia, we can prepare for possible future invasion in the European Union citrus growing area. So now I come to the one of the last slide, which is what we are launching now. We are launching now a call in 2 lots. Actually, we're launching in the first trimester 2025 to do research on biology of 2 African moths. The first one is the false codling moth, Tamatotibia leucotreta. There was recently in 2023 an EFSA opinion on this insect, which showed there is uncertainty about the area of Europe which could be suitable for the establishment of this insect, and this uncertainty comes mostly from lack of knowledge on the biology and thermal requirement of this African moth, which is very widespread in Eastern Africa. So we are launching a call to collect more data on biology and thermal requirement of the false codling moth in Eastern Africa. And the second lot of this call will be about taxonomy and biology of Leucinodes species, grass moth from Africa, And this is the reason for this is that in fact there are several species of this grass moth in Africa. They are intercepted regularly on the tomato, aubergine, which are traded into EU, but it is not very clear what species were there and what is their biology ecology. So to assess better the risk for Europe, to complete the assessment already conducted, we will need more data. So next slide is a summary of what I already said, so I can go fast on it. So fundamentally, it's a call in 2 lots, and the launch will be in Q1 2025, between February and March. And the budget we are still calculating, depending on how much work we are asking to the tasking grant, so between 300 and 500,000 euro. The value will be specified in the call together with the tender spec. So that's all from me. So I would pass the floor to Francesca.
Thanks, Giuseppe, and good morning to everyone. So in the next slide, what I plan to do is to give you a presentation of the upcoming course in the domain of plant health with a focus specific on monitoring. And before delving into the specifics of the course, what I would like to do is just give you a little bit of a context on how we've been building partnership with the member states working on monitoring. So in the last years, from 2019, we've been launching calls for the production of pest survey cards that some of you may be familiar with, and also for the development of the pest survey toolkit, which includes also software like Rebest and Repest. For the next round of upcoming calls, we really would like to focus instead on detection tools. And specifically, we're talking about 4 calls, and one will be focusing on insect trap methods, another one on the identification of host plants, and another one on the estimation of survey parameters, and another one using artificial intelligence techniques for pest recognition. Next slide, please. Okay, so talking about the first call, first of all, I would like to highlight the fact that the mechanism of outsourcing in this case is yet to be defined. So it would be either a grant or a procurement, and also the grant is yet to be defined. But what we know is the focus, and what we really are looking for is to work on insect trapping methods for the detection of EU priority pests. So we're going to focus on the list of those pests that are in the EU priority pest list. And what we're going to look at is basically what we are expecting is that there is a development of a method to assess the trap effectiveness, and then the development of an inventory where all the trap methods are listed together with their characteristics. These 2 information would be very key to create and design the practical guidelines to actually use and deploy the traps in practice within activities relating to detection and delimiting surveys. What we would like to include in this kind of course is demonstration activities, that is the choice of 3 pilots, so the choice of 3 insects that are within the EU priority pest, and to run 3 case studies, and to involve within these case studies also the members belonging to the network of pest surveillance. And the idea is to involve these members in their capacity of final users, because in this way we show that we keep relevant and that we favor the following uptake of this methodology. Next slide, please. Okay, for the second call, the situation is the same as the previous one. That is, the mechanism of outsourcing is yet to be decided. So this would be either a grant or a procurement, and also the budget is still to be defined. But what is clear is the focus that we're looking for, that is the remote sensing for identification of target host population. So what we expect from the outcomes of this project will be the production of an inventory of existing geospatial data on potential host plants, and then the development of methods for using this data for the specific aim of identifying the host target population, as well as the epidemiological units within it, and then, if possible, also risk areas and changes within it. eventually we're looking for the development of dedicated tools. Also for this kind of course, we would look for demonstration activities, that is 3 pilots where we choose 3 case studies in which we involve the members of the network of pest surveillance. Next slide, please. Okay, for the third call is actually would be a relaunch and is yet to be decided whether it would be a grant or procurement, and the budget is to be confirmed. But what we're looking at for this call is to develop experimental and statistical protocols for estimating survey parameters for designing specifically delimiting surveys. So what we're looking at here is the development of protocols that look specifically at 3 parameters, which are the sensitivity of the detection methods used in the field, how to estimate the prevalence threshold for eradication, and then the relative risk. Also, in this case, we're going to use the same approach as described earlier. That is, we're going to look at 3 case studies so that we have demonstration of the use of these protocols. Next slide, please. No, sorry, the last. Okay, thank you. So in terms of the fourth call, this one, we're looking at a combination of grant and procurement. So we're looking at 2 steps. And the main focus will be to adopt AI techniques for identify EU quarantine pests. So the idea is again to look at insects, but within the list of quarantine pests. And the first step will be to have a grant where we're seeking for a consortium where NPPOs should be present. And the idea would be to build with the first step a catalogue of validated pictures of union quarantine pests. And this is important because this picture will be the basis of any AI-driven models and technology for then supporting the identification at entry point. So this catalog needs to be then, we need to identify a procedure for its maintenance and also for integration within the EFSA IT systems. For the second step, that is the actual application of these and adoption of these pictures, most probably within a range of existing mobile application or the development of one specific one, we're going to be looking for a procurement, but the scope of this procurement is yet to be decided. As for the other calls, we're going to be looking for testing whatever has been developed and also developing the procedure for validating new picture for the introduction of new pests whenever a new pest is recognized and categorized as a quarantine pest. So for the monitoring activity and possible monitoring calls is everything, and I give the floor back to my colleague Gorgias. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. Thank you all colleagues for taking the time to go through the course that you are preparing. Very clear, although some course, it is clear that they are still in the making. So there is certain margin for content to be added. As I said at the beginning, what you saw is based on our current draft work program. So certainly there will be changes for some of the courses that you saw that are event stage, but even for courses that are more advanced, more mature and closer to their publication date, please always consult the text document as it is published, because this is the binding one. The chat for the questions and answers has been opened for a few minutes now, so please feel free to write any questions you might have. Yes, I see there a question. Yes, it has been one of the questions that we had received at registration stage by one of the registrants, one of the participants. I will read the question. I think it's addressed to Christina. Is there a specific requirement for how the EU-FORA funding should be used? So I think that the question refers to the 55,000 euros. That is the budget foreseen for its consortium of partners there. Is there any specific requirement on how the consortium should make use of this amount of money? Christina, you are, I think, the best person to reply. I pass the floor to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gorgias, and thank you for the question. No, there's no specific requirement. It's this type of grant, the contribution from EFSA. EFSA doesn't prescribe how the grant amount is to be split between the two organizations, and also there is no justification of costs. You have all the information. You can find further information in the call text, but in summary, this is the main important or the main information about this. So no prescription on how the amount needs to be split between both organizations, and no justification of costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Very clear. For calls that are published, please also refer to the call text. In the vast majority of cases, the answer is there. And if there are still questions, you can always write, it is mentioned in the call, a specific email address that you can request clarifications there as well. I will go to the next question. I see that it is for Eve. I will read the question. Regarding the call on animal welfare, piloting a standard data collection of animal-based measures in broiler chickens, you mentioned that you were looking preferentially for a consortium of Article 36 organizations. Does this mean that the consortium will be mandatory, or is just a consortium proposal, or it's just that the consortium proposal will get more points in the award criteria? I'm not sure if this is known at this stage, but Eve, please, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Yes, I think it's not known for the moment. I indeed said preferentially, because what we find important in the call is that we try to cover as much as possible what we call different production systems or uses or management practices. So we were we think at least that we can you can cover that better by making a consortium with different member states all over in Europe. So that's why I said preferentially. So that's the underlying reason, but indeed it's not carved in stone yet. But that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eve. I will move to the next question. A colleague asks us, is there any information or list published on EFSA's website on the upcoming calls planned for 2025 and 2026, or are we going to share the slides? So first of all, yes, we are going to publish this video and also the slides that we have used. So you will have this information there. And yes, in general, we do publish a preview, a kind of a table of what we're expecting to launch. But I think it's better to pass the floor to Donna. Donna, I think that you addressed it in your replies earlier, but would you like to clarify? Thank you.
Yeah, EFSA every year publishes a list on our website under both the grant page and the procurement page of a list of the opportunities that will be launched during the course of the coming year. So we should shortly publish on the EFSA website in early January the full list of calls for 2025, but there will also be there an indication of some of the calls for 2026 and 2027. Last year, a nuance that we also added to that list was including a more detailed description of what the call would cover and a link back to the presentations which have been given here today by my colleagues for those calls that have been presented today. Now, the calls that have been presented today are not the only calls that we will be launching throughout the course of 2025 and 2026. There may be others added, so the list will be more comprehensive than the calls that you've seen presented today.
Thank you very much, Donna. Very clear, and indeed this is something that we are being asked frequently, and I understand that people would be interested to have information about what's coming up as soon as possible. So a very fair question, I would say. I would move to the next one. I will read it. I think it's best to be addressed by Christina. Good morning. Related to the EU-FORA, the fellowship program that we have, the call that we have launched, is there a limit for the age of the scholarship candidate, or related to the contract he or she has with his or her organization? For instance, is it possible that he or she can be a researcher? Christina, could you please address this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. As indicated before, all this information can be found in the call text, but in summary, no, there is no age limitation. There is a limitation on the years of experience. So fellows must have a minimum of 3 years and a maximum of 15 years of working experience, or let's say experience, in areas of food safety, understanding food safety as a comprehensive term, including all areas of EFSA's remit. And regarding more concrete questions, like if the type of contract that the fellow has with the fellows in an organization, or the state administrative status, I kindly invite you to address the question in writing to the either EU-FORA email address or to EFSA procurement as indicated in the call, because this way we can address the question better with a concrete example. So if you provide a concrete example of the example of your concern, this way we can address it, the question better. So I kindly invite you for very concrete questions to come back to us in writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Very clear. I would now move to another question that we have received. It concerns the call that we presented, that Germán presented in the domain of pesticides. So the question is, in the domain of pesticides, the call there, is the focus going to be on human health or also on environment? I understand that the call is being prepared, so the information is not fully there yet, but Germán, could you help? Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the question. Well, indeed, the call is in the draft state, but we foresee to address all the areas related to pesticides. That means human health, but also animal health, environment, residues. So yeah, it would be touching all the areas related to risk assessment of pesticides.
Thank you, Germán. One more question that we have received also regarding EU-FORA. What would be the recommended time before the call deadline that the host and the future fellow need to engage, so that there is enough time to develop the proposal and administrative issues to be addressed in time? I suspect that this requires a little bit of speculation on your side, Christina, since it should really vary between across the different organizations, but please.
Yes, indeed, adds a little bit of a speculation, because it depends a lot on whether the organizations knew each other before. So it's something that they already had some kind of partnership coming from, for example, a previous project, and they have simply identified a fellow that matches the possibility of a work program. But if they are new to each other, I would recommend to start early, especially to the discussions regarding the work program, to ensure that it really matches what the interest of both organizations, and also to read the call documents well, to ensure that the administrative documents are going to be ready on time. It's not a difficult call. It doesn't require many documents, but it requires some signatures from the organizations, of course, and sometimes these take time. So I would certainly recommend you to start as soon as possible. Also, I'm not an expert in the funding and tender opportunities portal, but I'm pretty sure that you can start the submission and leave it in draft and save it as draft, and you can go back to it whenever needed. So yes, this is as much as I can speculate depending on the situation of the organizations.
Thank you very much, Christina, for that. I take the opportunity to remind what you also reiterated, but also Elena in the first part. If there is an organization that is looking for partners, the focal point would be the first stop, perhaps the first group of people that would help in identifying partners. And this is particularly important for EU-FORA because it requires the application to become a consortium of two organizations. I would also like to stress the thing that you highlighted, Christina, that there are internal administrative procedures in the organizations that may require some time. So yes, the general advice would normally be, don't leave it at the very last moment, because unexpected things might happen. But with regards to finding partners, the focal points, I believe, could help. I'm checking the chat to see if we have received another question. I don't believe that this is the case. So I'm happy to say that we are faster than expected in delivering this content. which means that we have quite a lot of time for questions to be asked. Now, if there is, however, nothing, I'm also checking with my colleagues here. Okay, so I don't think that we have any more questions for the moment. I would suggest then that we proceed with wrapping up and closing this meeting. Yes, as I said before, we intend to publish the recording of this meeting. We will need a few days, but we will do that shortly after the closure of this event. As I also said at the beginning of both the two parts, we will send you a link for a survey, and there we will ask you your opinion about the quality of the event, but perhaps most importantly, your views about how we can perhaps improve for future such events. Rest assured that we read what you send us, so if you have any ideas or any constructive criticism, it will be really very helpful for us. I would like to close with a very big thanks to the colleagues that presented in the first and the second part, and also a big thanks to people that did not appear in front of the camera but had a significant contribution to this event today. First and foremost, my colleague in the No unit, Katerina Vlahu, who is actually in the same room as me, a few meters away from me. She has been the mastermind, I think, in putting together the form and the content of this event. A very big thanks also to my colleagues in the Corsair unit, our unit for corporate services, and their associates, Francesco Amoretti, that make sure that all the resources that we needed for this event today were in place at the right time. Silvia Bonanno, the colleague that made sure that everything digital for our event today worked in the way that it should. We are grateful for that. And last but not least, our producer, Karina Vastola. Needless to say, a very big thanks to all of you, dear participants, dear colleagues, for having given us the time to present what we expect to have as cooperation opportunities in the coming 2 years, and also for your questions. They are also helpful for us to understand what are the points that we need to clarify for the future. So with that, again, a big thanks from all of us, from Cloudy Parma. Many thanks for your participation, and have a nice afternoon. Goodbye.